Hello, Wisdom Seekers. Welcome to the Wisdom Seeker Live podcast that we have every Monday morning at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. And appreciate those of you that are our regulars and look forward to interacting together today on the topic of can we help other people too much? And I know that seems like kind of a crazy question, especially coming from me and the fact that I promote very much the principle of universal design, that we are designed to help each other throughout our journey in life. But we'll delve into that. I'll give you a little more background in a moment. As you join us today, please let us know where you are joining from. And then also, please, of course, feel free to ask questions and make comments along the way. And I look forward to a good conversation today. One note is that we're going to be doing an abbreviated session today of only 30 minutes. Normally we're an hour, but some life demands require that I cut it short a bit today. And welcome, Rick. Glad to have you with us. Just a reminder for us, wisdom is about a journey. Starts with knowledge, and the knowledge is what we gather all around us, purposely, accidentally. And then we move from knowledge, which is not the place we stop, but where we launch from. And we move into understanding. And understanding is where we take knowledge and begin to use it and to apply it in our situations and where we have our needs and so on. And then the next step, which is the more critical step in this journey, is that we move into wisdom. And wisdom is basically about seeing things from a much bigger perspective, outside of ourselves, outside of just our circumstances and the effect that it has on us. So wisdom is a much bigger picture. And for those of us of a spiritual bent, we like to express it as trying to see things through God's eyes. And so that's where we work from. Welcome, and Mario and Eunice and Sina and Rosemary. Glad to have all of you here today. And I know this is kind of a little bit of a unique topic, but just so you'll know, the background is that, in life, we deal with situations, relational situations, and in particular, and especially with family as life goes forward. And in a situation that I'm actually dealing with currently, and my own family raised this question for me. And so the question is, are there moments where we, with the best of intent, and even with the thought that it is going to be beneficial, that we help people to a point that we actually are becoming part of the problem? And one of the terms that I think of as we look at this concept is the word enabling, and just trying to consider how we draw the line. I know I haven't figured out where that magic spot is at this point, or the balance. But, again, we are to help each other without a doubt. That is such an important priority. But at moments, do we get out of balance and end up actually creating a problem by overdoing helping? And so that's what I want to explore with you all today, and hope that the audience will share their thoughts with us on the topic as well. And so my concern is that we all have challenges and have to grow. And when we try to with great intentions, help people and accommodate people, understand people, support people. Are we at times getting out of balance? And as a result, we're actually contributing to the problem rather than helping. Let's see here. Comments from Rick. If we help too much, they become dependent on us. Good comment. And that is very true. And what's pretty insightful about that comment is that when it happens, uh, what we don't want to happen happens, in that the idea is that by our help, they become dependent while thinking that they are still very independent. And it's an interesting challenge there, because as we move forward and deal with life situations, and in this particular case, dealing with uh, elderly parents and so on, it's a challenge we face. The dynamic is rather interesting for those of you that not been there yet. Dealing with our elderly parents and adjusting to them and trying to find that balance is a real key. And so this question becomes a real challenge for those of us that are dealing with it. Let's see what Rosemary says. Yes, it is possible to create a disabling situation simply uh, by over helping others. Okay, so I'm not alone in this, apparently, and I'm glad to know that. Sometimes we all think, okay, I'm just the only one that is wrestling with this. So, and I appreciate your comment, Rosemary. And what I want to know now is what we can do to begin to balance that out and find that balance. And so we're all seeking this together today. And let's see, Eunice's comment says, can we help other too much? I don't understand the question. Good. All right. Thank you, Eunice. I appreciate you asking for clarification. Okay. Excuse me. Sometimes, there's two situations. In fact, the poll that I have put out, someone responded that there are times where we don't need to help at all. We just need to listen and be understanding and supportive. Okay? But what I was sharing with them is that we, in an effort to help other people, we will start doing things or supporting them in things they are doing. And as Rosemary mentioned, become a part of the problem, in that we are actually, rather than helping them, we began to, in some ways, disable them. And and as Rick put it, they become too dependent on us. And it's an interesting balance, especially if we're a caregiver for family and so on. So that's the nature of the question, Eunice, is that we want to figure out how we can remain healthy in helping others without causing more issues for them in the process. And it's something that personally I had never really considered until recently. So I hope I answered your question, Eunice, or clarified the question, Eunice. Rosemary offers, we stopped training durability and removed self-responsibility. We need to remember is that we encourage our babies to learn how to crawl and how to walk. And if we don't, that children would never learn to walk. Yeah, that's the thing, is that we need to be working to help people not be dependent on us as such. Plus, the other aspect of this is that as we evaluate our own situation and help others with their situation, if we're not careful, we cause that person not to have a sense of what is really going on. And in other words, we give them possibly a false sense of their being able to be independent and so on. And as a result, they don't consider the consequences of their choices because we have, in some regard, shielded them from the results of their choices. And it can create some real challenging situations for us. And so that's where this is all originating, trying to really find wisdom in how to approach these things. And situation can be in a number of settings. It can be being a physical caretaker. It can be dealing with aging family. And it can be dealing with family or friends that are struggling with trouble in their life. And rather than truly help them, we end up shielding them from the consequences of their choices, and therefore lose they lose the ability to address things for themselves so that they can become successful and overcome what they're dealing with, or deal with it in a a healthy fashion. Welcome, Kwame, and welcome, Nada. Glad to have you, and Marius, glad to have you as well. So let's see here. Love to see your comments. This is great because for me, this is what I hope we can share and dig around and find some good answers. We need to look at the amount of free handouts that are provided. We train people to not do for themselves, and instead we enable charities to fill a need without requiring mutual outcomes. Lack of accountability for our choices. You're right on target, Rosemary. I believe that is a real key question: is, are we causing them to again become dependent on the what we do to help, rather than helping them grow into their independence as an individual? And it's not so that we're trying to make people not need each other or the like, but at the end of the day, I think we need to be helping them grow into what they are needing to be and who they're needing to be. And if we're as a result, if we're causing them to either not truly grow because all we're doing is doing it for them. Secondly, if it gives them an improper sense of what's going on, then they aren't motivated by the consequences they have, and as a result, they aren't able to grow. And so let's see, is there such a thing as too much help? Eunice, it's a good question. And I think that part of the challenge of this question is most of the time, most people don't help enough. They don't make it a priority. But I do think that in seeking wisdom, then we should be looking for what is the balancing characteristic here, and that is the considering whether or not we have overdone the help to a point that we are now becoming part of the problem. So to answer your question, I believe there is a time when we can give too much help, and as a result become a real part of the problem. Okay, Marius says the balance is to give the rod instead of the fish as much as possible. Okay, I like that analogy, Marius. Rather than giving them the fish, we teach them how to fish, and I agree. And so, yes, I think what we need to be targeting is not trying to give them the answer as much as help them with ways to find the answer and to grow from it so that they can function as an individual. And take this to the extreme, and something that I grow concerned at times with parenting is that we, as parents, sometimes teach our children to be so dependent on us, and assuming that life goes as it does, if you will, normal or average, we're going to precede our children. And at that point, if we have enabled or made them so dependent on us that when we pass, then their life becomes devastated. And at that point, we realize that we have not actually dealt in such a way to prepare them for the inevitabilities of life. So good point, good thought there, Marius. Thanks. Okay, and a follow-up thought, and that is, once the rod is given, then their accountability is key. Yes, what we do is we give them ways to function, and that includes helping them with expectations that need to go along with it. Then part of what we can do to help them is to actually help them to be accountable, not just to us, but to the consequences that go with their choices, and help them work through that. And and I have to go back. I see Rosemary's comment is primarily directed at Eunice, but she makes the last part of her comment is that, especially in family, is that we get caught up with trying to keep the peace at all costs. And as a result of that, we get in situations where we enable each other to not grow and become stronger and moving into a place that we need to be. So just something to think about, and I'm glad to know that that there is an issue here. And again, sometimes I think like others, we go, well, maybe it's just me and everybody else has got it figured out. And so that's nice to know that it's a real issue and worthy to address it. All right, Rosemary. And I know Rosemary is really, this is a strong suit for Rosemary, because both personally and professionally, she really works in this arena and has lots of experience to offer. She says, my 4 sons all needed to learn how to cook and clean just the same as my daughter. They had to learn how to be self-reliable, as well as understanding that others would rely upon them in turn. My grandchildren are all learning the same lessons. I have no concern whatsoever as to the future people my grandchildren are growing into. Yes. And it's funny, because those of us that are parenting and that are paying attention and really trying to be a good parent recognize this. I think for me, because of where I am in life and with family, my problem is remembering how to address the challenge as we have aging parents. Is how do we keep them walking or learning or using the things that they know and they have learned and they've even taught us? How do we help support them in maintaining that as long as possible, recognizing that at points along the way that we're actually in some regards moving in a backwards direction? So that's part of the challenge I'm throwing out is how do we find the balance between helping the right amount and going overboard in those situations, especially. Eunice says everything in moderation, but helping is an exception, right? Again, Eunice, I think that that helping, many times it is a good choice and it is a part of our design. But when we go too much helping, we start actually harming. That's where I'm trying to find and understand where we can find that line or ways to approach the question of that. At what point in our helping do we go beyond help to actually be creating harm or hardship or future issues? Because once the help is removed, can the person continue forward? Maybe that'll help kind of define this a little bit, in that isn't the goal for us in us helping people is to help them no longer need our help. And I think what the challenge is that if we approach this unwisely, it'll get to a point where they are not able to help themselves or to be independent because they become so dependent on us. And that's kind of the situation that I'm trying to understand, and I think a lot of us face. Okay. Eunice, good point. I think that your point is really well made. It's time to admit helping others can be a toxic addiction. Addiction. And what's interesting, and this is where it really gets kind of muddy or difficult, is that the addiction that you reference, it can be not only on the receiver side but on the giver side. I know that I have watched caregivers in particular that become so caught up and defined by helping someone else. And again, this is not uncommon to find this in family situations where people are ill, you're a long-term caregiver, and so on. But you become so caught up in helping that when the either the person passes away or whatever, at that point we are devastated not only at the loss but at what defines us. And so, yes, I think we've got to find that balance in there, and that we do have to be mindful that, especially in situations with family, that we have to be very cautious not to overhelp to a point that we become an enabler or a part of the problem rather than helping with a solution. Good morning, Zaid. Glad to have you, and even late, that's fine. And let's see. I'm just looking over at the comments. So at the end of the day, what I hope for us is that at a minimum, the kind of the standing order for us as wisdom seekers is that we, on a regular basis, are disconnecting from distractions, spending time observing inwardly and outwardly, and in seeking wisdom. And I'm hoping that what this topic today is will help us to all kind of stop and disconnect and observe on this issue. Where are we in terms of helping people, and at what point do we overstep and stop helping and actually start creating a problem of its own, or enabling someone not to grow any further and become dependent? I believe one of the psychological terms that maybe we are getting into here is codependence, and in that we are actually causing someone to be, or the two people to become codependent, and which becomes a real unhealthy situation. And so, something worth considering. Generally, our problem is that too many people are too busy to actually help. And I recognize that. I believe that's what Eunice is hitting on, that we usually are not over indexing on helping. We're actually doing quite the opposite. But in this case, we're dealing with situations where I believe that we are over helping, if you will. Rosemary makes a comment: both my parents were quite ill and old before they passed. For me, it was a hard conversation with both of them about what they were hoping for and what they would allow me to do for them. It is about being honest and respectful to them. In the end, my mom passed peacefully in her sleep. I know the last words she heard were from me as she hung up the phone. I said, "I love you, Mom." My dad was different. I had to get legal control of his affairs. This is a lot of the struggle that I am referring to, Rosemary, and it's a real challenge. And trying to be wise in approaching it is a challenge. In that, what, just like you just shared, there's no one pattern for any individual. Even in our family, one situation goes peacefully and as well as possible, and the other one is a real challenge. And one of the keys in this case is indeed communication. And it's hard as we deal with family, especially our parents, when we try to have that communication and we're trying to be honest about it, but we also know that we should show great respect for them. And so it's a tough one to figure out, and that is the challenge. That's the wisdom that I hope we can find for working through these situations. And so I really appreciate your input. And it looks like that some of you are having some technical issues. Appreciate your patience. Now we're going to wrap up here in a few minutes. Like I said, we've got to have a shortened version today, and I apologize for that, but we'll wrap up here in just a couple of minutes. Eunice makes a comment that over pampering and overindulgence can certainly be harmful to children. Indeed. And what I am questioning and checking and trying to learn for myself is that as we deal with family, that we end up with some of the same challenges, that we are overindulgent or pampering, if you will, with those situations. And it can become unhealthy and actually create difficulties of its own if we're not careful. And as Eunice pointed out, almost become a toxic addiction. So, well, and I see from my other screen that indeed there's something going on with the live stream. Not sure what's happening. And, sometimes the gremlins can be a little bit of a problem. Hopefully it's not something on my end. If it is, I will certainly work on trying to correct it. So as we wrap up, I think that part of the takeaway for today is that we need to be mindful that we need to help people. That is a universal design we have as humans. But we need to be mindful of getting to a point, especially in certain situations, where we are not over helping or overindulging to a point that we're creating other problems. And for that, we need wisdom to consider when those situations arise. And it's not going to be a magic formula on it, because as Rosemary shared with our parents, one parent reacts and situation goes one way, and with the other parent, it becomes a completely different scenario. And so I pray that we'll all seek wisdom on this and find direction and not assume automatically that we can't, that it's not possible to overhelp. In fact, that it is very possible and even happens, and how to avoid that. So thank you, everyone. Next week, we're going to have a special guest. My friend Bill Dolan from LinkedIn is going to join us. He has a really interesting story that he has been sharing at times, and he's got a book out about it. So I look forward to our time with Bill next week. In the meantime, I pray you have an amazing week, that you're blessed remarkably, and that you will go about seeking and gaining wisdom in your life and helping others to do so as well. God bless everyone. Have an amazing week. We will see you next week with our special guest, Bill Dolan. Thanks, everyone.